Welcome back. Today I'm going to teach you one of the most exciting new builds in Terran vs. Zerg. I have a 92% win rate in Terran vs. Zerg in High Masters. It's actually disgusting. You might be like, what's the build? Is it bio? Is it... Well, let's take a look. In the TVZ matchup, 23-2. But what's the build, Winter? What could it be? As we're going in, it's going to be a standard gas first. It's how to get... This is a good clickbait title, right? How to get a 69 kill-death ratio with Battlecruisers. It is a Battlecruiser designated pressure. Okay. So that's what we're going to be working on. It starts out like most any other Terran build. In this game, my opponent drone scouts, but there are a few checkpoints that you have to make it past in order to effectively use the Battlecruisers. It is... a little bit vulnerable to early pressure, like if they rush roaches. So I'm always scouting at the 1 minute mark. Is he going pool first? Can I expand to the low ground? That's the first question I'm asking myself. If you want the exact build, I get the depot is on 13. You rally your first, well, really 14. You rally your first SCV out after it finishes. And then after that, the next SCV goes and builds your gas geyser, the refinery. And then past that, when you have the minerals and the depots finished, you get a barracks, etc., etc. But it's a Reaper expand into Hellions with a Starport follow-up. So that Starport also gives you options, like if they're doing a roach rush or something. Now I see two bases. He's going hatch first. I can tell by the pool timing and the fact he has a hatchery with gas. So what that means, I'm safe to expand. Get the orbital immediately. Get the expansion coming up. He still has a drone harassing, which is pretty uncommon. But eventually go back and take that expo. Oh, I got annoyed. I screwed it up here. This is me screwing up my own build. I take the factory because I was so annoyed by the drone. I didn't want to bother with it anymore, so I just get the factory first. Usually the expansion will be before the factory. It's not a big difference. The benefit of the gas first means as your Reaper finishes, you have enough to get a reactor to use with that factory nearly immediately. Now, I screwed up and got the factory before... the expansion, so the timings are a little off. But the second gas is coming up as soon as possible after the factory is building. I think this is a good example. This is me doing a mediocre execution of the build. But now I'm checking, okay, how many lings do you have? Do you have drones on the low ground? Essentially meaning you're not building a huge flood of lings, because the big vulnerabilities are early attacks. So I'm actually really dipping in here. Are you going to do a Bane bust, a Roach bust, something like that that'll hit before you have any Starport units to help deal with it? Looking for the third, confirm the third base, and now feeling safe to build Hellions. Total noob loses the Reaper. So, no more scouting there, but the fact there are two Queens already on the low ground, a third base, and he had some drones at the net, I'm reasonably sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm reasonably sure that he's not going to be all-inning me this second. So the Starport finishes. This is a standard Destiny Cloudfist build. The 1-1-1. I'm getting a Viking immediately. So here's another key part of it I've kind of added in. I'm not saying that no one does this, but I've added in personally. Is I keep the barracks on the tech lab. And then if an Overlord comes in to scout, I start concussive shells, which is only 50-50. And then the Terran player might think you're going for stim or something like that, as many players will do. So if the Overlord comes in, there is no Overlord here, I'm hunting for it. The first Viking clears OBs and removes scouting. But if an Overlord did come in, I'd start concussive shells and leave the tech lab there until after the Viking finished and killed it. Just give him a little bit more misinformation. I've got the fusion core in the back of the base, and he actually ends up scouting it. And that does not end this build. The fusion core started as soon as I had the gas after building a Viking. Just because he sees the fusion core does not mean Battlecruisers cannot be effective. I think the Battlecruiser, it's... Before you had, like with Banshees and stuff, you got a little chisel. But the Battlecruiser is like a hammer and chisel. You put it in the right spot and you start cracking through their defenses. But the key here is I'm not relying on the Battlecruiser to win the game. I'm not going to try to all-out kill him. I've got my third gas. That usually starts while the fusion core is building. You might be like, Winter, what are the timings? What are the supplies? I don't know. I just do the build. I really should write them down, but that's how I learn. Is I play enough games. I'm like, you can get your third gas after the fusion core. Try not to let Zerglings in, you noob. After the fusion core, but before the battlecruiser. So that way you have enough gas to be able to also get weapon refit / Yamato cannon for the battlecruiser, ideally by the time it's coming out, as well as the gas to get the BC itself, and any follow-up here. I'll usually end up making 2 or 3, but honestly I just kind of freestyle. Armory is on the way. The Armory, now, in the newest patch, the eventual transition will be Cyclone Hellion with some starport units in support. So right now, I'm gonna gamble. I have to decide, like, am I gonna attack forward? I'm actually not confident because he scouted it. If he didn't scout the fusion core or the battlecruiser, then I'd probably just jump into the main, because unless he's definitely scouted it, yeah. I see here no spore crawler, only a couple queens. He's expecting it in the main. I'm just gonna pause for a second. What did he have? He had 3 spores in the main. He's building a spire, but guess what? You don't just jump willy-nilly. Okay, you gotta scout a little ahead. The way you lose here is your 400, 300 unit. It costs as many minerals as a command center, plus 300 gas. So I used the Hellions. Because he scouted, I was using the Hellions to scout around. I had a suspicion he might overreact, and this will happen a lot. This is why I think the build is so strong. He can't defend all his bases perfectly. If he tries to build 3 spore crawlers per base, well, guess what? You didn't even need to make a battlecruiser, because he just killed 9 drones, plus however many minerals. So you wait for the opportunity, jump in. The first jump, the most important. But here I see no spore crawlers. Queens are exposed. You can just walk the battlecruiser over, and I'm so confident I'm going to get damage done. I'm expanding to the third, and now this is the key timing, because I'm likely not going to kill him outright. So behind this, as the first battlecruiser and Hellions are in there, sometimes the Hellions and Hellbats are in a different place. Sometimes they're with the cruiser. It really depends. It depends. It's a really flexible build for being a capital ship in a bunch of walking bathtubs with flames shooting out of them, which doesn't make sense. But whatever. It's a bathtub of napalm. But behind this, I have a lot of map control. He has to deal with it, so I'm not just sitting back trying to micro. And Battlecruiser's not the most micro-oriented unit either, so you want to get more production up. There are a couple different splits you can go from here, but this is the key point, besides being supply blocked like a noob. Adding on factories is my choice, and also armor upgrades, because I'm going to go for Cyclones. What's important here is, 1, the armor upgrade, really helpful with the battlecruiser, because it already has a lot of armor and HP, and also the Cyclone knock-on does spell damage, which means it's not affected by weapons upgrades. And since the upgrades are split here, I should probably move my face a little bit. Since the upgrades are split here, then using the armor works for both air and ground units, so that's what I'm working on. Can you transition into bio is a question. I've never really tried it. It seems to really lend itself to just going mech, because you already have the armory. Cyclones can give you spot anti-air. They're actually really good against mutas and corruptors in low numbers. They can easily take them out once they get their mag field upgrade. So here I'm kind of just on top of the queens, trying to cut the queen count down. This is super indecisive, by the way. I either should have brought the battlecruiser with it. Once again, this is not a perfect execution game. This is me making some mistakes and not being as decisive as I could. But since the battlecruiser fires while moving, it's like a phoenix raining down hellfire. I can just micro away while still hitting the legs. And also, I'm always taking note of, ideally I'd have a second battle. If I had a second battlecruiser and it wasn't supply blocked, I could probably jump in and potentially win the game, or at least get way ahead. But if my battlecruiser has a tactical jump, pretty much what you want to do, it's kind of like a spot recall. You want to have the battlecruiser take as much damage as possible, then jump away. Like right here, the queens are really looking for it, but I can still kill overlords. I can go back and repair. My Viking's still going to work. Factories behind, clearing up creep. So at this point, I'm expecting him. I scan there. I probably should have had an engineering back. But we start the Cyclone upgrade, Magfield Accelerator, which doubles the lock-on damage, and it kills units so fast. I jump a second battlecruiser, and be like, that's a lot of queens. Target the queen with the highest energy with Yamato cannon, so it can't transfuse as much, and then bring in the Hellions to combine their damage. This is just such a dangerous build. You can hit from so many different angles. Kind of feels like a Protoss with their warpins. Well, it is. I guess it is warping in. But from here, I'm going to speed it up a little bit because now we're at the stage of the game where I feel like I have a good economy. He has 41 drones. I got 60 SCVs. I personally struggle with making sure I kind of buckle down and get my production and get enough units together, because that's really hard as Terran. You got these very micro-oriented units. But at this point in the game, you got to make sure, okay, I got my turrets in case he goes mutas. I'm building I have enough production facilities. Like right now, he's got a handful of roaches coming through, which is not a big deal to me, to be honest. I just need to be careful that I don't get overrun and lose a ton of economy. And if I can do that, I'm getting +2 armor.
Research complete.
But ideally, I keep the BCs alive. The only things I've found that directly counter this is if he's staying 2 base. Like, if a Zerg player is not committing to that 3rd base by the time you would be starting a Battlecruiser, you gotta make sure he's not going for a Spire or for a Nidus. Because those things, besides like Mainling Bus and Roach Bus, a quick lair tech all-in will hit usually before a Battlecruiser comes out. So in that case, you might need to switch up and be going for like Banshees or something like that. Especially if he's going mutas or is able to have a Spire, you might be looking at getting a Raven and getting more production. But I confirmed he was going for a 3rd base before the 4-minute mark, and that was a key part of this. I'm super supply, well, I was super supply buffed until I start losing. Spend your money. Why isn't he spending his money? You got 1,500, 800. That's like 3 more Battlecruisers. Or a dozen Cyclones. Spend your money.
Need more supply depots.
I do kind of keep making Battlecruisers. Well, having a Raven is nice for anti-armor missile mostly. And also for clearing creep. So I throw that in there if I don't quite have the minerals. Now, it doesn't really help out the Cyclones, but it helps the Battlecruisers a lot. And the Cyclone auto attack is some damage as well. Of course, the lock-ons are way more important, but... yeah, at this point, I'm kind of just grinding him down. I've got the tactical jumps. I really should have added on some more... well, I did add on some more production. I just didn't hotkey it in. You gotta be careful not to get over-aggressive. Honestly, it probably would have been better just sit back, make sure I'm building. So... I knew the Corruptors were coming to my base, so I jumped the Battlecruiser into the fight instead. Just kind of mixing it up. Keeping him back. It's a very aggressive mech style. You don't just sit back and build siege tanks. I probably should have sit back a little bit more, but you don't want to sit at home, because the lock-ons have a short cooldown. You want to use as many as possible. And of course, Battlecruisers can jump away, so every minute or two, I wouldn't recommend necessarily this style. I would say for lower level players, the Battlecruiser opener is still good against players who are expanding, but be prepared not to, like, you don't want to just jump into their base if they're on 2 bases. If they're on 2 bases, take a 3rd. Take a 3rd. Make him come to you, because you're going to have super cost-effective units. But the key is recognizing whether or not they want to be aggressive, because a lot of Zerg players, especially at the higher levels, are trying to get their drone count up in the early mid-game. So like the 5-6 minute mark is when they can be incredibly vulnerable. I've been getting armor upgrades throughout this. Sometimes, like, if they're really focused on ground units, like Roach Hydra, you may want to consider going for more tanks. But Cyclone Hellion actually does pretty well if you're microing it. But I probably should have added in a few more tanks. It's a work in progress. It's a very adaptable style, because you have Tech Lab factories, you got a Tech Lab starport, you got super mobile units early. Really, the only thing that is very dangerous outright is going for, like, jumping into a person who's attacking you. If he's attacking you, this is not... You're hitting a wall, essentially. But if it's a little bit weaker, and he's going for drones or an expand, well, you're much better off. I've used this to get my 90% plus win rate. The key is getting your production up in a timely manner, not losing your first Battlecruiser, and recognizing whether or not your opponent could be aggressive. I'd say the production is almost certainly the most important, but that is the most important thing for Terrans in general. is having a good production timing. No GG, because he doesn't respect the battlecruisers. I don't demand his respect, I just demand his ladder points. If you like this build guide, make sure to go ahead, like, subscribe, smash the like button like it got hit with a Yamato cannon from a tactical jump battlecruiser into a salty Zerg's base. Was I talking too much too fast? I feel like I was trying to convey way too much information in too short a time, but people can rewatch.